It's the Beatles from the beginning to the end. It's their solo careers. It's their humor. It's their incredible music. It's the British invasion. It's their American adversaries. It's an historical musical education. It's the Beatles and a whole lot more. A Beatles fan's paradise. It's Beatles-A-Rama. Tune in. You'll love it. This is Pat Matthews of Pat Matthews Productions, and I want to welcome you to Beatles-A-Rama TV, your favorite interviews and video all in one place, right here on Beatles-A-Rama TV. Beatles-A-Rama TV is on the air.
Hello, everybody. James D. Jones here of the Magical Mystery Tour, Beatle Years and Beyond for Beatles-A-Rama Radio and TV. And today I have a special treat for all of you out there, the one and only filmmaker, Simon Weitzman. Good morning, Simon. How are you?
Good morning. I am very well, speaking from very cold UK here.
I guess, it's morning for me, but it's mid-afternoon for you. But
yes,
the power of technology, we are together.
We're on the same planet, and that's all that counts.
That's all that counts. Well, Simon, let me introduce you to all the listeners out there. As I was saying about this filmmaker, Simon Weitzman, he approaches storytelling with an eye for intention rather than excess. Okay, a graduate of Bournemouth University's Film and TV program, and the creative force behind Fan Films Limited. Weitzman's work reflects so much of, as I'd like to say, a fan's perspective, a fan's view. There's a difference between making something and presenting it and also present it from a fan's point of view. And with that, his work reflects a thoughtful balance between craft, community, and character. Drawing from his London roots and his life in Luton, he's explored familiar worlds through a personal, quietly reflective lens. And in this conversation we're going to have today, we're going to talk about that process, that purpose, and what it means to build stories that resonate beyond the screen. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages and sizes, I present to you now the one and only Simon Weitzman. How you doing, Simon?
I'm very well. Thank you for that incredibly grand introduction, which I should have written down because it's much better than how I introduce myself. Yeah.
Well, I like to look, whenever I'm doing an interview, I like to look at the person in whole before they became what they became and see the evolution. And when I see that, I'm like, this guy has evolved, in such a way that it's caught a lot of people's attention. And obviously you must be doing something right, Simon. And let's talk about that. Now, you have studied film, and the university that you was at is a place known for balancing the technical aspect with storytelling. And looking back, what part of your education do you think most reshaped how you see the world, not just how you make films?
It's a good question. Basically, it's a Bournemouth Film and TV School. was actually is actually a college rather than a university. I didn't quite have the acumen or academic ability to hit a university. Although I have to say, James, that directly opposite us was Bournemouth University, where they had a really nice cafe. And so we used to kind of wander over there and pretend that we were more academically astute than we really were. I think in answer to the question, I'm an only child, and I have a very small family. So I've always had a slight perspective that I've grown up slightly on the outside of the fringes of the world. So I'm constantly trying to sort of make sense of everything going on in the world, whether it be in what I do as a filmmaker, or otherwise. So I think that kind of area was kind of interesting. The storytelling thing actually came in a totally different way. I was writing short stories and things when I was quite young, and sort of handing them out and giving them to people. And one of the people that was a great sort of advocate and mentor to me, and still is right now, is a guy called Alan Dean Foster. And I don't know if any of your audience will know who Alan Dean Foster is, but Alan is the ghostwriter for George Lucas. So he wrote the Star Wars novel, and he was also the writer of the Alien novel. He wrote Chronicles of Riddick. He wrote with Clint Eastwood, I believe, on Power Rider, and he also came up with the original storyline for the Star Trek motion picture film. Wow. So he basically, and I sort of approached him. I haven't changed much over the years from when I was young. I was just a bit shorter. So he picked up my letter in when I was 15. So I'm now in my late 50s. And we talk most weeks. We still talk most weeks. It's brilliant. And I'm actually doing something about him at the moment. So so that was kind of I like storytelling. I like the idea of being able to tell a story, and maybe a fantasy story, because the limits and the perspective of the world that you can set is very much more different to the one that I knew. I mean, remember, I was very young when I started writing. So to write, you can write from some experience, but when you're that young, it's quite nice to go into that kind of make-believe world, science fiction world, and others. And so when I was at college, I did some things in the film, part of it, but my roommate was a guy called John Austin. He at the time had been the guitarist for Tina Turner on tour. Oh, wow. And so he and I were very into music and the music side of things. And so we wanted to kind of make music videos, which was kind of sort of scorned on by most of the tutors at the school. And because we didn't fit in, we ended up kind of going off and really doing our own 16mm music videos. And as a result of that, that kind of got me into a company called Limelight. And Limelight made kind of music videos. I ended up working with a director called Anton Corbin for a while. So Anton was involved with making videos for Depeche Mode, famously. I worked on a couple of those with him, worked on Personal Jesus and Enjoy the Silence and various others. So that kind of gave me an education into framing storytelling within music.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a good launch. And I was like 19 at the time when I left college. So, I was very young, I'd gone into college pretty early. So I ended up the funniest thing about that, James, is that the first video I did was in the London Docklands, before they were really, that's how old I am, but before they were really developed, not
back in the day.
It wasn't Victorian times, but it was back in the day. And so I turned up on set, it was a gated set, and there were about 30 people on the crew. I have no idea why on earth they had 30 people on the crew. There's no point. We got there and the catering van blew up. And so everyone just stood there, and I kind of thought, well, before we shoot anything, there's a cafe down the road. It was about 11 o'clock at night. It was one of these all-night truck stop
Yeah,
places.
yeah, yeah.
So I went down there and I got like about 40, sort of cheese sandwiches or bacon sandwiches or whatever, and came back. And when I came back, because I was so young, they said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm the director here on the set." And they were like, they looked me up and down because I was like, 19. And said, "I don't think so, mate. We'll take the sandwiches and things off you, and we'll give it to the crew and the producer and the director." And I'm like, so I actually, this was in the days before mobile phones, so I had to literally shout over the gates to someone to validate that I was allowed to come in. I wasn't just some kid that turned up, So,
oh man, never a dull moment, right?
That was my first experience of actually directing my own thing, was not being allowed on my own set. So, yeah.
Well, what caught my attention, what you said about framing stories and tales within music, which, if you think about it, a song is, anywhere from maybe 2 minutes tops to excessively 6 minutes. And to be able to tell a full story within that short amount of time does take effort, take talent.
It follows the same classic route, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
beginning, middle, and end. You've
That's
got a
it.
beginning to a story in a song. You have the middle in it, which can be musical, middle eight, or it can be a middle part where it's reflective or does something different, and then you go back to the end part. So I've got a very good friend who's a brilliant story writer called Sam Snape, who was one of the writers. He co-wrote All Creatures Great and Small, which is a big thing over here.
Yeah.
And,
No, very familiar with it.
His teaching to his classes, is that, if you want to tell a good story, the story arc is somebody goes up a tree, throw a rock at them, and they have to work out how to evade the rock, catch the rock, and get down. That's kind of like the story arc. So you put somebody up a tree, you throw rocks at them, and if they can get them way down, it's how they got down.
I see.
So music follows quite a lot of the same rules in terms of songwriting. So it's
a beginning, a middle eight,
and
a good ending. Yeah,
and a good end.
Yeah.
I think, it's only the Sopranos that followed the true musical sense by basically just tapering out, finishing in the middle of a sentence, but which like their fade off. So I've always been kind of conscious of the story arc in things and how story arcs work.
I love music that does tell a story. I really appreciate songs that can tell you a quick little story. And, a lot of times, I'll give the example of the Beatles. Every song was a story about something, whether it was love or a character or an experience. There was always stories to be told. If you heard the stories, you knew it, and it drew you in. Like, oh, what's this about? And when you look at like songs like Eleanor Rigby, right? Perfect story song. Tells the story of 3 different individuals, right? And ourselves. Nowhere Man, tells stories. She came in through the bathroom window. There's just there's stories set to music. And I love that part of bands that can incorporate stories into the music. It's easier to interpret and to enjoy and be entertained. So
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think just on the cusp of the end of that, James, is that the other thing you have to remember for the Beatles, and I always goes through my head how young they were when they were writing these songs. They're writing about things that should or were, in many people's cases, well beyond the years that they were to write them.
Yeah,
you shouldn't be able to write as intricate things about the meaning of life and the feelings that people have and the way their lives are, and telling those stories so elegantly when you're in your early mid-20s. It's crazy.
Well, and especially during that time.
Exactly. Yeah,
and
totally.
You're right. If you think about it, they were basically kids when they started.
Yeah.
And
And yet they're writing with a maturity that's so far beyond their age.
right,
It's
right.
insane, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, in the beginning, the kids loved the Beatles. And it wasn't until maybe later 64, early 65 that mom and dad finally started going, "Oh, I like
Mm,
that song," you know.
mm,
So,
mm.
but getting back to your being the filmmaker, um, your identity, if you will. Uh, okay, you're a Londoner, or you were a Londoner, and now you're living in. Is it pronounced Luton or
It's
Luton?
Luton.
I
Luton.
thought so.
Luton.
Okay, I got it
Yeah.
right the first time. So those two places, very different rhythms, to say the least, and textures. Okay, but how does where you live influence the kinds of stories that you're drawn to, consciously or unconsciously?
That's a wow. How long have you got, James? I think, I think the thing is, obviously, I was brought up in London. So I
Right.
was brought up in London, and then I actually moved here 21 years ago. So although I've been here a long time in Luton, far
Yeah.
longer than I intended to be, it's the reason I'm here is because it's a good place to get around the country.
Hmm.
The line I like to use is that Luton is the greatest place I've ever lived to leave.
I
So
like that. I
which
like that.
architecturally is true, but I think it does influence. I think where you live kind of can influence um, the way that you think about stories. And remember that when I was growing up in my 20s, I was doing a lot of work. So I worked on quite a lot of music videos, and then I was working on TV shows, and those were in
Mhm.
central London, in Soho area. So I was working on series, and then I was working for Disney, and Disney were also in London.
Mm,
And then through Disney, I got the opportunity to go to other places. I was going
mm.
to America, where you are,
Right.
and then kind of into Europe. And so that kind of opens your eyes again in your early 20s. I was like 22, 23 when I started working for Disney.
Wow.
And so you grow up really quickly because you get to see all these amazing places that you've
Oh,
heard of a
yeah.
lot of the time and experience them. But I can't say at 22, 23 that I would have been, although I was writing other things, sitting down and writing quite with the elegance of humanity that Paul McCartney or John
Mhm.
Lennon or George were writing at. I
Right.
mean, I was writing other things which were reasonably successful. I mean, not on their level, obviously, but things that were relatively successful, which got
Yeah.
sold into the film industry. But in terms of that critical thing when you're writing about real life and real people,
Yeah.
even though I was born so much later than they were, that's not a skill that I have. That it's unique. I mean, it's not a unique skill to be able to do that, but I think it's
Right.
relatively unique that they were able to do it at that age. From my
Yeah.
end, it's been much later. My awareness of things kind of, I'm in my late 50s, and my awareness of things is much more tangible now maybe than it was when I was in my 20s and 30s. Very different. But as
Oh,
you
yeah.
said, influenced by London. Being in London, it's such a busy city, lots of things going, lots of
Oh,
people, you
yeah.
meet lots of people and lots of different things happen. So I think I was kind of quite blessed to be able to be, or in that throng, particularly in the TV world and film world, where you could see different things and meet different people that were doing different things. It's quite interesting to see how they handled it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
Mm.
that's the thing. It sounds like where you lived influenced you, and you had basically the best of both worlds. The hustle and bustle of a busy city and all the intricate things that make a city hum,
Yes.
and the
Yeah.
fascinating stories within that. I
Yes, I
like
mean
it.
London in some ways can be quite similar, I guess, to places like New York. Though I
Right.
must admit, when I went to New York for the first time, I mean, on scale compared to London, it's just overwhelmingly bigger. So it's just like, oh gosh, okay, yeah.
Right.
Mm.
Well, as far as let's talk about Fan Films Limited, okay?
Mhm.
Um, they suggest a relationship with existing worlds, characters, and communities. What excites you about working in that space, and where do you draw the line between homage, if you will, and authorship?
Okay, so before I was doing the film that I've done, the Love Letter to the Beatles film,
Right.
which was, by the way, for other people that are slightly confused out there, originally known as Here, There, and Everywhere. It changed its name in 2021 when we were going along doing it. So my background on sort of the fandom side was through authorship, so writing books. So I worked with a very, very talented artist and also a very good writer called Paul Skellett. He and I had been doing a very large scale book about the history of golf, which is totally different to what people actually think it is. It's a very different story. So, but we kind of did this for a number of years and produced this enormous book. I was kind of a slightly latter-day Beatles fan. I'd grown up with them. And we had Beatles in our home on the record player, but I wasn't as completely kind of fan, sort of based as a lot of people were. So I had already got into my 30s. I was working with Paul. Paul was a complete Beatlehead. And so anywhere we went, we were listening to the Beatles, even if we were driving in Scotland doing a golf thing, And, at one point we were driving down B435 or whatever, and he was saying, "This is the long and winding road. This is the long and winding road we're on, right now." And so he had an encyclopedic knowledge and said, once we'd done the golf thing, that we should get into Beatle stuff. So we started off with a book called 8 Arms to Hold You, which was the diary.
I know that book.
And the whole fandom thing was completely alien to me. I'd not been to any of the Liverpool things or any of the American things. And we got invited when we completed this book to the Fest for Beatles fans in Chicago. And I can't remember what year it was, 2012, 13, 14, I can't, 13 maybe.
Right.
And we hadn't been, and it was, we were scared stiff, to be honest, James, because we hadn't entered the world of the fans. We had no idea what they'd make of the book that we'd come up with. And to our relief and kind of amazement, we were welcomed with open arms. So it was a really interesting introduction into that fan world.
Well, if you're going to be introduced to fans, Chicago really is a Beatles town. It really is.
Yeah, it is. And, we were really well accepted by local people from the area, but also from the whole fan spectrum of the Beatles. And it really kind of got me thinking, this is a place I love being. It's like if you're only child, and you grow up doing what I do, which is a relatively solitary animal doing things, then being with a group of people, they have to be the right set of people. And it just felt like they were instantly the right set of people. And that turned out to be the thing. And I was always kind of still on that outside of the inner fan base. I was very much on the margin. So the helicopter view of it was that this was a really great place where it didn't matter your color, your religion. It didn't matter what political persuasion you had. As soon as you were in the doors of the festival or into that festival, all of those things were irrelevant. It was just about the love of this band and friendship and camaraderie. And that really made a huge impression on me, even when I was just doing the books, even before I even thought about doing the film. That made such a huge impression that this group of people was such a different set of, and so eclectic, all very different to each other. And but when you're in that space, all the normal barriers of life sort of melted away. And I guess that's kind of a tribute to kind of what the Beatles managed to do universally with their music, is to do this. So that's kind of where I started to kind of feel that there was a very special kindredship with the fans, and I felt that I had to do something, because it seemed to be so important and such a I hate to use this word because we still have two wonderful people still very much with us, but this
Right.
is kind of like the candle for them, and also the legacy, and in time the memorial for this
Yeah.
incredible moment in our life. And we've all been
Yeah.
incredibly blessed to be alive in that time.
Yeah. Well, you know, as you were explaining the feeling of being at that Chicago Fest for Beatle fans, originally known as Beatle Fest. Some of us still call it that, right?
Yeah.
But I could totally relate. As soon as you were saying that, it seemed like whenever I got to the Beatle Fest or the Fest for Beatle fans, you felt like you were at home. You felt, I'm in my community. There's no judgment here. We're all comrades. There's all kinds of great music and good, will to men and women. And it didn't matter if you were young, old, male, female, black, white, oriental, whatever have you. None of that stuff mattered. You're in this place and it's a good spot. And with you catching up on that and catching that feeling, I got to do something. This is extraordinary. And you're telling a story with the Here, There, and Everywhere, now called
A love letter to the Beatles. Yes, that's right.
That's right. Now, the story before the spectacle, okay? In an era where technology can often overshadow narrative, emotion, how do you personally safeguard your story and those emotions from being drowned out by technique?
Oh, okay. That's a very good question. I like your questions. Very, very good. Very good. Technique. Well, I think that's the thing. I grew up being very influenced by a broadcaster over here. I'm sure you guys know, or some of you guys will know, called Bob Harris.
Yes, Whispering Bob Harris.
Whispering Bob Harris. And Whispering Bob Harris has been a huge influence on me. And I kind of, he's a really good friend, and I studied his technique of the way he does things. And one of the things, again, as a storyteller or an interviewer, is that you know where you want to go with a story with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of it is that you have to listen to what they say and adapt your route. It's like the river, isn't it? You have a river and it's running smooth, and then somebody will come along and they may say something that puts some rocks in the middle of the river, and then you have to take a different course to get it back on line.
Yep.
So what you don't want to do generally is be too fixed on what you're trying to get from somebody. You have an idea of what you want from somebody, but I mean, I'm sure you know, because you do this all the time, James, as well. You've done this for decades like me, but you have an idea of where you want to go with somebody, but you also need to let them, lead you on that route, and then very gently, if you can, or if you need to, then guide them back into where you need them to be, but also not to make that feel so obvious, and so that's kind of something that is, I suppose, it's a bit of an art form, and I've got better at it as I've got older. I guess we all have. But I think, and that was, I hope that comes across in the film, because generally, even the interviews that weren't used in the film, and there's no reason that the interviews weren't used in the film because they were inferior to anything that's in the film. It's just that you got 2 hours and 2 hours and 200 hours of footage to try and work out how you're going to tell a story. But in pretty much most of those interviews, there is, the person that I'm talking to, or the person we're talking to, is very much in a comfortable space. And again, it's about putting somebody into that space where they feel at home, they feel comfortable, they feel easy, and they're not particularly conscious in a way of trying to design an answer that they feel is going to suit an audience. They're just talking personally, and that's kind of how I feel the film resonates to people, in that the people that are speaking very openly and very easily, and hopefully talking about a number of subjects and areas that we all as fans can identify with and relate to.
Yeah. Well, and that's the beautiful thing about a good interview, is when your listeners and the audience obviously can relate and going, oh, I get it. That he feels the same way I do, so it's a point of connection with the listener as well. So it's good stuff, man. I like that. Now, with when you sit down and say, all right, I'm going to create a film, do you imagine a particular audience, or do you treat filmmaking as more as a private conversation that the audience is later invited to?
I think I go with emotion. So I think about a subject like the fans and fandom and what this fandom means. And then before I really even started filming anything, I had in mind an emotion, a feeling that I wanted people to have. And that was kind of very interesting because that related to the way it was edited as well. In that, people that were involved in that had to have a similar kind of they had to feel really easy about and confident about what they were doing in that sense. So I sort of set out, what emotions do I want an audience to feel that are in this fan group, and if I was kind of in their shoes, how would I want to feel while I'm watching this? Would I want to feel, I want to feel connected. I want to feel, as you said, James, oh, that's me. I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
Or that there are certain things where they're like, wow, I didn't even know that had happened, or that was a thing, So I kind of I daydream a lot. So I was daydreaming a lot about how I felt I wanted the audience to feel as they went along. And it takes a lot of crafting and a lot of arguments and various things in the editing process to kind of then achieve that, But I think we have, and I think that is very much, you go into it not thinking, it's not storyboarded, nothing is storyboarded. I very rarely storyboard anything. That was even when I was doing music videos.
Wow.
It was, I did storyboards for other people. I was actually storyboard artist for other people. But when it came to my own stuff, I had a very rough idea of where I wanted to go. And I think that if certainly it doesn't suit everyone, but for me, having a direction, that I wanted to go in, like that river that we were speaking about slightly earlier, is that kind of meandering river, is kind of the mindset that I took on board. Because what I didn't want to do is have something whereby you can get into a situation, James, I'm sure you know this situation, where you have such a rigid idea in your mind that if it goes off course, then you're lost. Then it all starts to unravel. And so I think you have to go into all of these things with a much more fuzzy mind, and kind of approach it in a way that it's the beauty of what happens in the universe and what it brings to you, and how that lands. So a lot of the time we were doing interviews, or I was doing interviews, where I thought I was going to go in to talk about something, and it kind of went in something else, and that was much more interesting, because it was their story that they wanted to tell, and you kind of just went with that and just crafted that with them. So that was kind of the way that I approached it. There was very little organization of it, and of course I got to a point where it was only ever meant to be a short film. Meant to be like 20 minutes, like, I'm going to do this 20 minutes, it's going to take me a year to do, no problem, and go with the camera, and I'll get it in a couple of festivals, and then I'll put this nice edit together, and it'll be fine. And then you fall down the rabbit hole, as you know, James, I'm sure with what you do, and 2 hours becomes 20 hours becomes 200 hours, and then you're just looking at like drives full of things, thinking, well, where do you start, but it just all fits together in the end, and it sort of floats around, and you kind of get a path. So the idea of the film, and this is really important, is that I'd always set out, I was very keen listening to the albums, particularly studio albums with the Beatles, and the way in which the rhythm of those albums went, the way the story and emotions went through those things. And I kind of very geekily put together a color-coded graph of all the different albums, and where they kind of lined up, and where they sort of took a sort of general line across that, and went, okay, if we can edit something that feels like it's an album, because basically an album is a series, an album is like 9, 10 to 12 or 14 stories.
Right.
Set out in a row. They're stories. and
Yeah.
they're either constructed to fall in a certain way, or they're inadvertently fall in a way, which, I mean, I'm sure the Beatles, Paul would be able to tell you this much better than I would ever be able to quote it. But there is a rhythm to the albums, particularly the studio albums, where they
Oh
do
yeah.
follow a certain emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that whatever we were doing felt familiar to the audience, but not necessarily for them to know why.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a few people come back who have watched the film who've said they'd really enjoyed it and it was terribly familiar, but they couldn't work out why. And I think it's because it does try and follow the idea of an album.
Yeah, I like that. Because if you think about it, a good album, like you said, each song represents a story, and the whole entire album is like a movie
Yeah,
of all those stories put together. That's a good way of
exactly.
putting it.
Well, you said it. It's your quote. It's brilliant.
Well, you inspired me there. So that was,
Oh,
I just put the dots together. Now, the other thing you're talking about, all these stories that didn't make the final cut. When can we expect the director's cut?
oh gosh. I think I mean there are plans. I mean, I would love to be able to create something. I mean, not necessarily commercially,
Yeah.
but something that's educational or historical. And I've actually had numerous talks with good friends like Ken Womack, the author Ken Womack,
Yeah.
who's
Of
brilliant,
course.
amazing person.
Yeah.
And it's straight, just coincidentally, did a couple of interviews with him for the film, which aren't in the film.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that they're not brilliant interviews. It's just that
Right.
obviously the style and rhythm of the way that it was going meant that it just didn't suit that particular way that fell. But so he and I have spoken about, sort of how you represent all of this information going forward, because there's so much of it. And I'm still, occasionally I go out and still create an interview, with somebody I haven't met, and go and do something, even though the film's finished. So it's because I think in a way it needs to be documented so that younger audiences can come and look at these interviews or study parts of them to see kind of how we in our lifetimes viewed the band and how it affected us as people. So I think there's an educational use for it. Whether or not there will ever be an opportunity to do a director's cut, I don't know. Whether I could live long enough to do it, I have no idea, to be honest.
Well,
but,
Simon, rather than do a director's cut, perhaps do a sequel and call it P.S. I Love You.
P.S. I love. Well, there you go. And yes, you will definitely get your points on that one. But I mean, it's not impossible that there would be a second installment. But
I'd love to see it.
I think the main thing, because these kind of films are not sort of, they're not like sort of theatrical movies, so they don't.
No, they're not like blockbusters.
They're not blockbusters. This is Kelsey, who's the distributor at Liverpool West. She sort of said, we sort of said the word for this film and others is they're percolators. They slowly bubble along, and people slowly get to find them. And then hopefully, if people like them enough, it starts to resonate and grow as an audience for it. I have to just to take you back for a moment on that. I wrote a short story many, many years ago when I was quite young, and it got sold by a very inventive agent that I had, and even more inventively it got sort of reimagined as the movie Event Horizon. I don't know if you know Event Horizon.
I do.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that film, when it came out, bombed completely in the cinemas. It didn't do very well. And it was only really when it went to DVD that it became this huge kind of thing. It just kind of there's one of the things that I'm very aware of with this film, it's a tiny film, remember, in the ocean of stuff about the Beatles,
Right.
But one thing I hope that is unique about it is that it is a true, because I'm a fan, John always said he was a fan,
right?
Paul's a fan, George is a fan, Ringo's a fan. All of us, we're all fans, and hopefully it's one of the films that genuinely gives the fans a platform to tell those stories and to tell how it feels to them and what it
Yeah.
means, because it's a really important part of the story, and there is no other band in the world that has this kind of following.
Yeah.
It's unique. It's totally
Yeah.
unique.
Well, and without fans, the music is nothing.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I think. I mean, they had this incredible canon of work, as Bob
Oh
Harris
yeah.
said. Where is it coming? It's coming out the stars. It's falling out
Yeah.
the sky. How are they doing it? And I'm sure that will probably be a question that's asked in 200-300 years.
Oh, easily.
But
Yeah.
but by the same thing, the fact that their stories and the things that they wrote have meant so much to people, to the point where
Yeah.
they live their life by it, or
Yeah.
their career is, but like we're doing here, our career is
Right.
based around this one band,
I know.
and
And it's
and there are people that write about, Jude Kessler,
right.
who writes about John. She's been writing about John for 45 years plus.
I know,
That's
right?
longer than he was alive, which is extraordinary.
It is amazing, isn't it?
But incredible to do. I mean, an
Yeah.
amazing achievement. And and again, there's an interview with her which I would love
Hmm.
people to see educationally, because not just of the passion that she has for John, but the way in which her and Rand, her husband,
Hmm.
have looked after dozens and dozens of young people who have had very difficult starts in life,
Hmm.
and they have dedicated a lot of their life to helping bring up young people and children to have a better life. And I think that thing from John and his start in life and things that happened to him in life are very
Right.
inspirational to them, but they've then taken it like miles beyond that story. So
Yeah.
I'd love people to see that story, which is extraordinary in its own right. But there's so many extraordinary stories, and that's the thing
Absolutely.
about Beatles fans, is that so many people have got extraordinary stories about their own lives, but also that's reflective on their love of this band, and maybe has
Yeah.
been, they've been able to make sense of it through the
Yeah.
Beatles music and the whole fan base. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. When you finally find something that clicks with you and you totally get it and you understand, you never want to let go of it. And then you want
No.
to find other people that feel the same way you do. And
Yeah.
your film unites all those people together, and in a unified way, differently, but in a unified way. It's good stuff. Now, speaking of that, silence, space, and what's unsaid, some of the most powerful moments in film happen between lines of dialogue. How intentional are you about silence, negative space, and ambiguity in your work?
Sorry.
No, I know
Had to
it's a
do that.
lot to
Sorry.
take in.
Yeah, there's a lot to take in. I was just kind of thinking about that. It's extremely important. It's extremely important, and pacing is extremely important. That was one of the biggest problems we had with the film over the years of trying to put it together, is how do you make something that feels comfortable to an audience, and also to this audience as well, that they will relate to. So negative space is a brilliant thing. Black is, I'm always a huge thing about, don't be afraid to go to black. Don't be afraid to fade to black and wait a moment before you come up again. A lot of I've got a brilliant editor that's working with me on some projects at the moment, and one of the things, he's one of the finest editors I've ever met. A brilliant
Mhm.
guy called Alex Daniel, and the funniest guy I've met in years. Really good guy. He's very young though. He's under 30, and one of the things, of course, because his background is in doing trailers.
Oh,
Trailers is kind of like
yeah, yeah. Zing,
so
zing, zoom.
to take him from the trailer world into the feature documentary or story arc, which is like from 2 to 3 minutes to 2 hours, is
Yeah,
a very big jump. So the kind of thing of like, okay, when you come out of something and you fade down from that, don't be
mhm.
afraid to wait a moment, because the audience may be thinking about what you've just said, or what the
Yeah,
last person just said, or what they've just listened to, the music they've just listened to. So don't be overly over keen to do that. And one of the other devices that was deployed in this film was to have those intersections sometimes either filled with like a fade or something from social media. So a YouTube moment or a
Yeah.
a very short clip of somebody on one of the different social media platforms, on TikTok,
Right. Right.
so, and then you kind of get this very different perspective about how somebody feels about this in like 10 seconds.
Right.
Whereas you then had a story, it's 2 minutes. But so the negative space one is a brilliant question, because obviously in storytelling, in drama, it's a massive thing. I think you're very astute to observe that, because it's incredibly underused in films. And
Yeah.
and I always think that the biggest problem you have is that the film director or the filmmaker has an attitude where they understand what they're trying to get as the emotion from the audience, and the movie and the studio is always looking at it thinking, oh, hang on a minute, are we going to lose the audience here for let's
Mhm.
hurry it up, let's shorten that gap,
Right.
let's just
Yeah.
get them onto the next thing. And I think that the way in which social media and all these things are cut now, whereas, and I'm guilty of it when I go to YouTube, of going,
Right.
right, okay, I'm going to watch this at double speed because it's like 10 minutes long, and I've got very astute at watching stuff at quicker speed. But the reality of it is that in really good storytelling, the pacing is everything, and it is
Right.
about those moments you let people reflect. And it's interesting. I think there are some moments in A Love Letter to the Beatles where we do allow people to kind of go, oh, right, and then think from it, and then you're onto something new, and that happens in songs, doesn't it, on an album?
Mm-hmm. Oh yes.
You're very affected by a song, you may want a moment to it, so the needle comes off that song, goes into the groove, and then comes up to the next song.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and sometimes even on like the Beatles albums, there's a gap
Yeah.
between, there is, and I always sort of felt that on some of these albums that those gaps were actually more designed and thought out than people give them credit for. I think that's all part of the experience of listening to the
Yeah.
album.
Well, and like you had said previously, that moment is a moment for them to absorb and reflect what they just heard or saw and take a deep breath. It's also, to me, it's like an equivalent to a dramatic pause. And then you're back into the again. So it gives you a moment to go, okay, I totally get that. That was a moment. And I actually get to acknowledge that was a moment. On to the next. So it's good stuff. And pacing, it's all about that. I'm glad you enjoy that question. I know a lot of people probably wouldn't ask that, but to me, it's all part of the experience.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. Silence is, the lyric, silence is golden.
Yes. Enjoy the silence.
Enjoy the silence. Exactly. Yeah.
So, influence without imitation. Which filmmakers or movements shaped you early on, and how did you eventually learn to step out from those influences to find your own voice?
Okay. Anton Corbijn was very important early on, obviously, in the first instance, the person I was able to work with, and
Right.
he is an incredible talent. And but again, a lot of what he did with his photography and his video making wasn't entirely planned. So there was an idea, there was a construction, there was a feeling of what he wanted to do. So I very much took that on. I was very much so George Lucas, of course, influenced me.
Of course,
Very,
right.
very much a Star Wars fan. And I think I really like the fact that Richard Lester was able to create the first, he was the godfather of like MTV.
I agree. I
you know
absolutely agree.
and
Music
he
television, what a concept.
music TV, and he took, when you think, you go into something like Hard Day's Night, and
Mhm.
nothing like that being done. Nothing.
No.
Nobody had even attempted that. It was an extraordinary thing to do, and I don't think he's appreciated quite as much as he should be for the fact that he created. And I like, again, there's a free spirit in his filmmaking, and it's, if you watch A Hard Day's Night, and particularly Help, they're relatively anarchic films
Oh
in a
yeah,
way.
yeah,
I mean, you know, they are anarchic, and I liked that style. I like the fact that, and also I love the fact that when it actually came to the music parts in those films, that he was like 20 years ahead of anyone making pop
yeah,
promos, music videos. I mean, they
yeah.
were, you know, for some of the music work in Help is unbelievable. You know,
Yes.
it's
I
just
love
beautiful.
Ticket to Ride, how they do
Ticket
that
to
one.
Ride, everything. It's just the way the smoke comes out of Ringo's
Yeah.
cigarette, and just that, and the facing each other, and all these. I always thought when ABBA did some of their videos that the influences were really right back to the Help.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, they were
Yeah.
like the face-to-face thing and all those kind of things
Hmm.
were really imagined from that. So I think Richard Lester was a big influence. I kind of liked. I was very Ridley Scott. I love listening to Ridley Scott and the way that Ridley Scott kind of creates films, and also, you know, some of the stories that he tells about Alien, which
Hmm.
kind of resonated with me because I've always kind of tried to work, if I, you know, with a small budget. These are
Right.
very tiny. I mean, you know, A Love Letter to the Beatles is a crowd-funded film, and I
Hmm.
have to say in the middle of this that without the fans, this film wouldn't exist. So
Right.
this is a fan-funded film, and there's another story to that because we lost all the money to when Pledge went bust, and then we relaunched on Indiegogo, and a lot of people came back. But you know, it's the fans that have made this happen. It's their film. I'm just a
Mm.
curator of their film, you know,
There you
but
go.
going back, so some of the small budget things that Ridley Scott talks about, particularly in
Yeah.
Alien,
Right.
where the budget was being cut and the set was actually being deconstructed because the people that held the budget were saying, you can't have that, you can't have that. And all the sets were actually getting smaller and smaller and
Right.
tighter. And that actually added to that sort of feeling of tension and claustrophobia in
Yeah.
Alien. It's the fact
Yeah.
that actually behind the scenes he was actually having to work with much smaller spaces
Yeah.
each week, you know. So I think that's kind of important, and I think it's it's a question of other sort of influence. I mean, we've just lost Rob Reiner.
Yeah.
Rob
Yeah.
Reiner, Spinal Tap, the godfather of mockumentary.
Yes.
You know, was, you know, Ricky Gervais is a genius,
Oh yeah.
but Ricky Gervais's office possibly wouldn't exist. Possibly, Ricky would probably tell me I'm an idiot, or words to that effect. But I think even Ricky would look back on This Is Spinal Tap and just
Hmm.
say that sets the benchmark for anything where it's kind of like, is this real? Is this? And of
Yeah.
course, the great thing about that film is that a lot of people did think it was real. You know,
Yeah. It was
think
so
that it was
ridiculous
real.
that
You know,
maybe it is real. I don't know.
you know, so beautifully made. And Rob Reiner, you look at what he's done. You know, Harry Met Sally. He's directed. It's a film with the kids in it.
Oh, Stand By Me.
You look at Stand By Me. I mean,
Right.
again, a groundbreaking film about
Yeah.
coming of age, adolescence,
Yeah.
the difficulties of being a young person in a modern world. I mean,
Right.
just an amazing filmmaker. And
Yeah.
what I loved about his work was the fact that he was able to do such different things with it. You know,
Oh yeah.
I've been doing a lot of Beatles stuff. You know, I have got the Alan thing, you know, the Star Wars thing as well. But you know, mainly most of the film stuff recently is in the Beatles thing. You look at Rob Reiner and
Hmm.
his portfolio of work that he was able to get across was so
Oh
different.
yeah.
Misery,
Misery. Yeah.
unbelievable film. You know,
Hmm.
so I
Your
think
number one fan.
yeah, I know it's so. That's a lot of people say that they get quite miserable when they listen to me, but yeah. So yeah,
Well,
yeah.
now when the credits are rolling, Simon, what do you hope lingers with the audience? Whether it's a feeling, a question, a disturbance, or clarity?
Well, I hope it's not a disturbance because that would be wrong. I would have got it totally wrong if that was what they came away from. But I think belonging is the word. I
Mhm.
belong to this film. This film is me. That's
Ah,
that's what the intention. I think that's what it does. Hopefully, for a lot of people will watch it and go, yeah, that's how I feel. That's how I am. That's what I feel.
And, with that, speaking of the fans, it's time now to hear a word from our sponsors.
This is Jude Sutherland Kessler, author of the John Lennon series, rocking right along with you to our favorite music here on Beatles-A-Rama. Hey, while you're listening, go to johnlennonseries.com and order Should Have Known Better, Volume 4 in the John Lennon series, a researched, documented narrative of John's life, with the Beatles, of course, in 1964. Check it out, johnlennonseries.com.
Do it now.
Simon, do you believe filmmakers have a responsibility beyond entertainment, culturally, socially, and emotionally? Or is that just something that emerges naturally rather than by design?
Well, I certainly don't think it happens by design. That's a really good statement, actually, because I think it would be very presumptuous for anyone who's in my industry to say that, yeah, I do that by design. That's exactly what I'm intending to do, although I've just told people
I meant to do that.
I meant to do that, and that's exactly how I should feel. But no, it's not. It's. I think we have a responsibility as filmmakers in this genre to be able to tell a story that people can relate to and that actually has a place. I did a film recently about Chris O'Dell, and Chris is a fantastic person. What a lovely lady she is. But again, somebody that came to this country at 19 had done a few years of doing things at 19 in the music industry, came here and then is working through Derek Taylor with the Beatles,
Right.
Mad life. And then kind of gets into this whole thing with the Rolling Stones and all of these incredible Genesis, the Queen, Led Zeppelin, everyone that she had, she went out on tour with, and the effect that had. So, the drugs, the drink, becoming, basically of her own admission, becoming alcoholic at the time, and then having to live with that onwards, that sort of permanent thing that you have to be aware of in yourself, from that, from those the halogen days. So I mean, I think telling that story as honestly as it's told is good. I'm doing a story at the moment about Shannon McDonald, the artist who does a lot of the Beatles stuff. And her story is, well, just to put it very plainly, her story is insane. It's incredible what she's actually come through as a human being to actually, the amount of abuse that she's been through in her life is extraordinary. And the things that she's had to deal with have been extraordinary. And to tell those stories honestly and to allow other people to kind of see themselves in that. Because I hope maybe in the Miss O'Dell film that people understand that what she did was pretty unique. She broke a glass ceiling for women in that industry at the time, and showed that it can be done and that there is no gender barrier to doing these jobs, which is absolutely right. And I think, from telling these stories, I'm very conscious that my responsibility is to the people I'm working with. And it is the same in the Love Letter to the Beatles. Each single story, you're responsible to the person that you're with at that time, telling their stories and letting them tell it as honestly as possible. So I think it is about allowing people to have the moment. And also, as we talked about earlier as an interviewer, is not being too rigid in the way that you want to interview something, and also shutting up and allowing them to speak in whatever direction they need to go in, because that's the honesty of what you're going to get out the other end.
And I find in my personal experiences that when you are quiet, the real stories come out. The tales that you may not rather have ever heard before come out flowing honestly and sincerely. And that's magic when you can catch those moments. So it's good stuff.
I think also it is about genuinely wanting to know that person's story. I mean, a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
a lot of people, I'm sure you've met them, a lot of people go into these stories and they have such a definite answer of what they want out of
Right.
somebody that they shape that person to actually suit their own goal. And I
Right.
think one of the things that I'm very, very conscious of is that, you know, all the people that I've interviewed and the way that I've tried to do the films is in a way that allows those people, that person, to speak. And I've not kind of just done it from a point of view, right, okay, I'm telling you a story, now I'm off. You know, I'm really serious about the fact that I get to know people and they become my friends. You know, Chris O'Dell is a really close friend of mine. Shannon McDonald is a really close friend of mine. We talk sometimes about projects, but we talk for hours about other things.
Yeah.
Life in general. And it's the same with people in the film. You know, there's the bootleg Beatles and there's many other people, Richard Porter, all sorts of other people, Mark Lapidos, who I speak to on pretty much a regular basis. They're my friends. They're like fam. The great thing about doing that film and this Beatles thing is they are genuinely like family to me.
Yeah, they're one big family of Beatle fans, you know.
Yeah, and it's not like I'm just doing it to kind of get something out of it myself. I'm doing it because they have got a brilliant story to tell and they deserve that stage to tell it. And I'm 100% behind them doing it.
I like that. Now, let me ask you this, Simon. And I think it's one of those things that you feel, like an intuition. The moment that you knew there was a specific moment, whether it was onset or offset, when you realized filmmaking wasn't just about what you did, but rather something that you are.
Yes, I mean, I think that's right. I think, as I said earlier on, since quite an early age, I kind of knew I was a storyteller. I like the art of telling the story, and I think the art of telling the story, particularly in a human sense, is because we're on this planet for no time.
No.
You know, we have no time on this planet, and we have to understand what the hell's going on, most of the time. So I'm constantly trying to kind of educate my tiny brain as to what it all means and why, and I think that gets very much integrated with the way that I try and that my medium of making sense of it is to make films. So that's my medium of making sense. Other people's medium of making sense of their life will be to paint something or to write or to go out and raise money running or whatever it is that they do that makes them feel that's my purpose. So I think it's kind of like having a purpose. And the moment that I felt particularly in this film that I really needed to finish is it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. My dad died right at the beginning of the pandemic, and we had a lot of family losses and a lot of family illness at that time.
Yeah,
and you just sort of think, my dad's never going to see this film, but I want to kind of make sure that it gets done, not just for my dad, but for other people that are losing people in the pandemic. So I think the pandemic was a real turning point for me in terms of how of really wanting to get it out. And then obviously there were all the other sort of hurdles that you have to kind of jump, obviously, in this particular story, in the Beatles world.
Right.
And I think you have to go in. I've got two friends that are particularly good. So David Simon, who is my old boss from Disney, who is part of my company as well. And he's one of the most, he's kind of like Yoda. He's like my Yoda. So he's very learned, very calm person, brilliant person. And then there's another lady that's in the film called Debbie Greenberg. And she saw the Beatles all 292 times that they were at the cavern, and her family owned the cavern at some point.
Right.
And I go and stay with, I call Debbie my Liverpool mother, and but that both of them have got this very big attitude, which is that you have to be, if you go into the world with hope, then the outcome of the hope is going to be better than if you go in and feel negatively about everything. So when I in 2017, I put a stake in the ground at a golf club, bizarrely, or flag in the ground and said, I'm going to make this film about fans because I think the fan world is really important to this. And then you kind of think, whatever happens, whatever barriers you're put against you, you're always thinking, I know we can do this. I know we can put this film out. A lot of people said, for obvious reasons, you'll never get this film out. It will never get out. You'll never be able to do it. And I'm thinking, well, there is always a way to get something out. And also the title is perfect. It's a love letter. It's exactly what it is.
Exactly.
And it's exactly what I wanted the fans that are in it and everyone that's involved in it to be able to deliver to John, Paul, George, and Ringo. That's exactly what I wanted it to be. And so I think hope is the main thing. And the moment of it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. That was the key moment of saying, right, we have to do this. I have to get this done.
Yeah. You took a moment and made a new moment. I like that. You made that decision.
You have to kind of think, well, because at that time, the pandemic was very different for a lot of people. It was very personal for me because of the losses. And you sort of think, if you leave something behind, there's got to be something that makes sense to people. And or if you've said you're going to do something for somebody, you've got to see it through,
Right.
And so I think that was really important to do that, not just for me, but for everyone that was involved in the film. I mean, like every level of the film as well,
Well, for the listeners out there who haven't seen your latest film, how would you describe it without giving it away?
Well, I don't think it matters that it gives it away. It is. I think the title is exactly what it says. So we have a saying over here. Ronseal does exactly what it says on the can. That was their big sort of advertising motto, and I think this does do what it says on the can. This is a love letter to the Beatles, and I think the reality of it is for people who kind of have just got into the younger people getting into it, for them to see why this band has meant so much and why the legacy of this band has been so important through many different decades, 50, 60 years, And I think for people in my generation and upwards, this is our chance to tell those stories and to be part of the scenery in that world. It's one of the things that I think is amazing is that, if you go to a Paul McCartney I've never been fortunate enough to get to a Paul McCartney concert, but if you're fortunate enough to get to a Paul McCartney concert, you're not really going just for the music or to listen to him. You're going to be in the orbit of somebody that's meant so much to all of those people that are in the stadium, in that place. The music is almost secondary. It's a strange thing to say, but the music is almost secondary. It's about, we are together experiencing this person who is part of this world that we live in, that's made our world better. And I think
the Fest for Beatle fans, it's a community.
Exactly that. Exactly.
And you're part of.
And it's the same, any of these things, if you go to Abbey Road on the river or Beatles on the beach, or if you come here and you're lucky enough to get to the International Beatle Week or into Europe, to any of the places that do these festivals, it is a pilgrimage. It's somewhere where it's a safe place. And I think the thing that's really nice about the film that a couple of people have said about it is it feels like a safe place. It's the Beatles duvet that you want to settle down under and just feel part of. Oh yes, I'm home. So we've said that when you go to these places, you feel like you're home.
Right.
That's, I think, what I hope what this film does is you feel like you're home when you're watching it. And I think that's, if people get that feeling that they feel like they're home with this film, then it's done its job. It doesn't matter if it ever makes any money. That's not the point. That's not the point. The point is, for me, it's about enough people really getting to see it and just thinking, this is us. This is our home. This is where we live.
Yeah. Well, that is a great perspective of how to look at that, and I that's refreshing. That's refreshing. It's a story that needed to be told.
Yes.
Plain and simple.
Yeah. And it's one of these really, people have done, but, there have been some books and various things where they've looked at the fan side of it. I think this is kind of like this. What I wanted to do with this is make sure that it's the fans, it's all their perspective, and it's their world, and it's sharing that world with everyone. You know, that's
It's the fans who built the Beatles to the point of where they were and are,
absolutely.
even 60 years later.
Yeah,
Now,
which is extraordinary.
Now, looking forward, Simon, looking forward, okay, without giving anything away, what questions or themes are you currently occupying in your mind as you think about future projects?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think we're in a really difficult place with the world as it stands, and I'm not going to get into any politics with this.
I get that. Yeah.
But I think one of the things that sort of slightly distresses me in the world is the fact that, and I knew this would happen, when we went non-linear with TV. You know, when I was growing up, you had, you know, BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV, and then eventually you had Channel 4, and then this other weird thing called Channel 5 came along, and then you had Sky, and then
Sky.
and I remember sitting in a world. I was making content for phones, you know, all the original content for phones in a company, and going to a Vodafone meeting. And one of the things that was really funny is we spent an hour waiting for them because they were talking about what irony meant, you know, and the irony of that was that, you know, that they put everything else out and it all fell apart. But that was another thing. The content, but I got very worried when we became non-linear, in a respect that although it opened up this wonderful world, you know, the YouTube, we've got these incredible things, you know, and we've got all the, you know, Facebook, we've got TikTok, we've got, you know, for better
all
or for
this
worse,
technology,
X or whatever it is, you know, ways of actually putting content out there. The problem that you have with that is that once you do that, you start to saturate the market, then the quality of what really shines through becomes diminished. So my issue with it is that my concern is that there are a lot of brilliant documentaries out there at the moment. There's Peter Asher's just bought one out, and you know, and there's, you know, Nicky Hopkins, the really wonderful documentary on Nicky Hopkins' life, and
we love Nicky.
There's all the fabulous films that Roger and David have done. You know, sort of no Hamburg, no Beatles, and all these wonderful films. And they all deserve a space, and they all deserve to be seen by a big audience. And it's whether or not the bigger corporations are going to allow that to happen. You know, because the bigger corporations are they're tied up with a lot of very big projects, which are great, and we all love them.
Yeah.
But the problem is that there is there's this feeling going on. I feel in the industry right now, this feeling, let's just keep the door shut on everything outside it. So my perspective is kind of slightly, I suppose, tainted. There's many stories I'd love to do, loads of stories I'd love to do, and many things that I thought, it's amazing to do. Yeah. But it's, can we find an audience for it? Can we find an audience for it? Can we find a platform to find an audience for them?
Right. No,
I think that's really hard. And, you know, you have to be extremely lucky with the way that you find an audience these days. You know, we don't, because the whole social way in which we are structured. I grew up, I got home from school, I did my homework, we sat and we ate food, and we either watched the telly while we were having food, or we had our food and then we watched the telly, or we listened to the record on record player. Right. And it was very kind of like, that's what you did. And it was very,
it was limited.
It was limited, but it actually,
we made the most of it.
A, we made the most of it, and B, we had a routine. There was a family routine. And one of the things, I'm sure half of your audience just clicking off now, but shut up. But the reality of it is that this complete sort of explosion of channels and content and everything means that, you know, a lot of people that really try and do it as an art form or a craft, our space to shine in or do something or make or have a voice in is becoming increasingly small. It's slimmer than it used to be. And I think it's important that the bigger channels, these big channels, remember that it's great to have feature films and
Oh, of
drama.
course.
Of course, it's great to have feature. It's escapism. It's exactly what we need, particularly in this time of our lives, in the world that we live in, and the difficult political landscape that we live in now. It's a very important thing that we have these escapism. But there's millions of really brilliant human stories out there, and animal stories, human stories. And I think, that world is becoming smaller.
Yeah.
And the platform for them to exist is becoming diminished. And I think it's really important that it's kind of like the local shop, isn't it? The local store. We have loads of supermarkets. We always go to the supermarkets and we buy, because it's so convenient to go to the supermarket, isn't it?
Right.
Or the superstore or the supermarket. Everything's under one roof, and it's all there, and it's probably relatively cheap. We don't care about the quality because it's probably fine.
Yeah.
But actually, what we've then neglected is all of our local stores, all the people that set up the family businesses, that make beautiful things, that take time over the craft to set, or even if they're doing what the superstores are doing, just presenting it that much better, or just making you feel when you go in there that there is a relationship. I've come here to buy this thing. It means something to me to buy this thing and own it. And that relationship that you have with the person that owns it or has made it is really special, and it's very important to our human nature. And we're losing that in our general day-to-day life, in the way that we consume content, and we're losing that in our general life in the way that we go to superstores and we just neglect these kind of little stores that are in our towns and villages and areas. And it's the same with filmmaking. We are, we're run by the huge conglomerates of the world that pump out some fantastic stuff. Don't get me wrong. There's amazing stuff out there by some incredibly talented people. But there's a lot of artisans out there, and I count myself in the artisan world, where our platform is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller to get these stories out through. And I think that's a fair reflection on where we are in this documentary filmmaking industry at the moment.
Yeah. When you say that, I absolutely see it. It's like there's plenty of technology to make these documentaries, these other stories of interest, but the platforms, like you say, they got the gatekeeper and they're keeping those doors locked. And if you were to do like a grocery store analogy, a grocery store has millions of things, and maybe some things you'll never even know about because you're unaware and you're missing out, but you don't know it. It's kind of like the fans and the viewers, when they only have what the big companies offer. Well, now you're missing some of those human stories, some of those documentaries that maybe it's not a big blockbuster, but it is an interesting story and many can relate to. So I see what you're saying. I never thought of it in those terms about the platform in getting these movies out and these documentaries, these stories out. Yeah, it's got to be tough, I can imagine. And it's almost like being lost in white noise.
Well, yeah, it can be. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I work with Liverpool West, but and they're great at what they do, and that's their life.
Yeah.
That's what their livelihood and their life. But
Right.
I think we were having these conversations where it is the world is built. Human beings, our uniqueness in humanity is that we're able to sing. Nobody else sings, by the way. There are no other species sings. Birds. There's bird song, but it's not song. It's language.
Right. It's language.
It's language. It's not song. We're the only species that sing or make music in that sense. We're the only species, although there are some primates that can do stuff. But we're the only species that tell stories as part of our growth, as part of our development as people. And that storytelling is, through the word document, to document those stories so that people learn and learn from those stories, or learn about somebody else's life and the things that they've been through, or relate to that person, or don't relate to that person, or and can make those judgments or think about things. It's about documentaries are about telling stories of humanity and the way that we as a species are unique
Yeah.
and possibly unique.
The human experience.
The human experience, exactly the right phrase, James. And
Yeah.
that is, and we're losing that. I think that the problem with, we're trying to push documentaries away. It's like we did that last year or whatever.
It's all been done.
It's all been done. And to be fair, a lot of it has. But but on the other hand, there are some really interesting stories and people and things
And presentations.
And we've been telling stories since the dawn of our species. So if we start closing the doors on the smaller makers of those stories, then you start to also, you're guiding people in a direction. And I hate to use this term, there's an authoritarian element to guiding you down one route, and that's not we as a species do. I'm not,
No.
whatever people want to do in their life politically is fine, but as a human being, we need to have these tentacles out exploring what these stories of humanity are, and we need platforms for them to do it that are open enough so that people can find them.
Yeah, that's a really great way of putting it. I never really thought of it that way, but boy, that's a good perspective, and it's reality. Sad. Now, Simon, we'll close this interview, and if you've been challenged by any
people want to go home, don't they? Let's face it.
Well, if you thought my questions were where they kind of make you really go, oh, I got to think about this.
Very much.
This one is our closing question. What is your favorite color? No, I'm kidding. I don't mean to make you spit your drink out.
Blue. Yeah.
If you could give just one piece of advice to a younger self just starting out with film school, what would it be, and would you actually listen?
Great question. I would probably, I think I did when I was younger, I did quite a lot of different things as well. So I branched out into other things. And I think I think the one thing that I would say is that you have to, if I could reach out to my younger self and advise me as an older self person, it would be always do things that you're passionate about, that you have a love for. We don't get long on this planet. Some of us don't get long at all. Some of our lives are cut very short, very early, and some of our lives are cut short very suddenly. If I was talking to my younger self, I probably would have, on a financial level, would have said, try and have a backup plan where you can actually earn a living, and then with that security, then follow your passion. Even if that passion leads you to insecurity, at least you've had that platform to get there.
Right.
And I think from my end, it is I'm not I'm not a things person. I don't crave things.
Right.
I have a computer here, but I don't own a television. And that's because my television blew up, and I thought, I don't have a TV. Okay, I will cope without it. I don't have a washing machine. I use my laundrette, or the sink. I hand wash. I don't have. My radio is 40 years old upstairs. It's an old, proper. I hate the way that people use the word bandwidth. I have no bandwidth to do this. Bandwidth was the AM thing that went from here to here. That's what it was.
Your
That
dial.
was it. Your dial. That's
wavelength, baby.
That's all it means. So I'm not a things person. So I think, the thing that I would say to people is that don't always worry about what other people have. When you're growing up, you're like, they've got a car, they've got a house, they've got this, they've got that, they've got a watch, they've got whatever it is. It's not important. The other thing that is, it's important to have enough money to not starve to death, of course.
Right, of course.
I was saying this to somebody else the other day. I was speaking to my friend Stuart, and we were talking about this. Nobody dies and their eulogy starts with, here lies James. Here lies James. He had exactly this amount in his account. You know, it's that nobody starts. I mean, great. Maybe one person will go, "Oh, I'm going to do that now."
Yeah.
But nobody. You know, the financial side of it is
Yeah.
actually irrelevant to in our existence as a human being. You know, the
Right.
thing is that if you want to do something with your life that you're passionate about, that you wake up and you're happy doing, even if you're not earning a great deal of money, then chase it. Always chase it. Because
Yeah.
one of the big things that we forget about in our world is legacy. I'm not fortunate enough. Unfortunately, I got divorced before I was able to have children. You know, and my partner who I'm with now, you know, we didn't have children. So and so I've always missed out on that thing of having a child or
Right.
bringing up a child. So, you know, from my end, it's a lot of my life has been about trying to create legacy. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about in my life is trying to work out the role that music plays, and Beatles music sometimes as well, plays within the worlds of dementia, Alzheimer's, and brain injuries. You know, so I stage with, there's a very famous actress over here, Vicky McClure, who's on Line of Duty and Trigger Point, all sorts of other stuff. And she's on various series on Sky and in American on films and stuff. She has a choir called the Our Dementia Choir. And every year on about the 10th or 11th or 12th of November, we stage a concert, a benefit concert at the Cavern Club in Liverpool, where the choir, who all have dementia, sing an hour of the Beatles, and they bring their family, and we fill the place, and it's the most beautiful thing, and it creates memory. It creates these incredible memories. We film it as well, creates these amazing memories. And I have another program where we're starting. It's very hard. We would start putting pianos into reconstituted pianos into brain injury clinics. The music is incredibly important to people with brain injury.
I agree.
Particularly piano music for some reason. And so one of the things that I would say that I have kept my promise on is that as soon as I knew I wasn't going to have children, it was important to me that I worked towards things that had legacy, even if I end up being buried in a ditch, that kind of doesn't matter. It's kind of like the starving arse's pauper's kind of grave thing. But what matters, and what I'd say to particularly younger people maybe that are listening to this, is that, one of the things you have to be aware of is that it doesn't matter what car you drive. It doesn't matter how much you have in your bank account. If you have a passion for doing something like telling stories or, find a way of doing it. There's always a way of doing it. And if you're going to do it with love, and do it. I've always said to the people I work with, I said to Alex when I started working with him on editing, and I said to anyone I work with that's younger, is that when you're doing this, particularly what you and I do, is that you have to enjoy the process. Yes. Always remember, enjoy the process. If you wake up and you think, and you go into something, even if it's difficult and hard, and say, I don't care if it's difficult and hard, I'm going to enjoy the process, then that is vital, because the outcome will be much better.
Yeah. Well, you open yourself up to more positive experiences.
Yeah. And also as storytellers like you, and doing your show that you're doing right now, and all the other things that you do and the things that I do, if you go into that and you enjoy the process, then that enjoyment of the process comes out through the screen or through the airwaves.
Yeah.
It makes a huge
people can
difference.
relate.
And that's exactly it. People relate to you because they're with you. You've kind of, and I think the last thing I would say is that if you're going into this creative art, is never get too big for your boots. Always, modesty and being modest is the whole thing, because at the end of the day, what we do as a broadcaster or as a filmmaker, we're just curators for people's stories.
That's it.
That's what we're just an echo for them to put their story out. So I've never considered myself to be in any way different to the fans that are in the films or any of the people I meet, because we're all the same.
I've always said to my listeners for the 26 years that my show is a fans show. because I'm a fan just like the rest of us, you know?
Yeah, same here.
And I'm not above it or better than. I'm in the thick of it,
I
right? Like
love
you.
I love that when you say that, you go into a Liverpudlian accent. Quite amazing. You
Well,
actually do it almost subconsciously.
well,
That's really interesting.
honestly,
Yeah. Yeah.
my family is actually from Scotland, very
Yeah.
Scouse, if you will.
Yes.
And
So I
they
can tell that. I can hear it.
I
Yeah.
was raised by my grandfolks. And
Yeah.
so when you said, don't get too big for your boots, that's something my
Yeah.
grandmother would have said easily. I
Yeah.
was basically their interpreter growing up. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Brilliant. I
yeah.
can. I love the accent. Yeah.
So when
Brilliant.
you hear that, that's my real me.
Mm.
I don't use it because sometimes you're limited on the gigs you can get. So I try to,
Mm.
especially here in the States, I stay straight and narrow if I can, but sometimes it comes out.
The last thing I was going to say to younger audiences
Yeah.
is that one of the most important things maybe to tell them if they're
Mhm.
trying to get into what we're doing is to listen with your questions. That sounds like a really weird thing to say. Listen with the questions, and because listen with the questions, because if you want to, because you're listening, you want to get an answer from that person.
Mhm.
But you have to listen to what they're saying, because that will always adapt the direction that you take that interview or that talk with.
Yeah.
And so you have to listen to the question. All
Yeah.
you young folk out there.
Well, how many times do we see people listening to reply rather than listening to understand?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
we must not scroll. We must focus on what's in front of you. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Simon, I want to thank you for a wonderful interview. Folks,
Well,
make sure that you check out this film. Simon, is there a good website that folks can go to check out more about this young man named Simon?
well, they can. There's a few places they can do. I mean, for the films, they can go to liverpoolwestproductions.com, I believe, and they'll see not just my films. They'll see all the wonderful films that Liverpool West are putting out. I mean, some
Yeah.
incredible work that's going on through people I know who are brilliantly talented.
Mhm.
And then I mean, I keep a very low radar, to be honest. But I did recently. Ruth and Angie McCartney have got McCartney Media, I believe,
Yeah.
and I've kind of I'm represented as one of their directors. So they can learn about me on the McCartneystudios.com, I think it is, site, and I'm one of the many different people that they look after and talk about on their site.
Nice.
So they can find out me there. If they want to see the film, then Amazon Prime is one of the good. I think you can watch it. You can either hire it or get the DVD or whatever.
Right.
And it's also on Roku. It's on Tubi. It's on Fandango, and it's also on DVD. So, and it will be coming out. As said earlier on in the interview, it's a percolator film. So, over the months coming, it will start to turn up on different platforms in different countries and different territories. It's a process that takes 6 to 8 months to kind of really fully get out. So, and then hopefully we may have the odd showing of it in a cinema or a studio somewhere where people can just physically come and see it and get together. And we did one at Rogue Best's Museum in Liverpool, at the Liverpool Beatles Museum, and we put it out to get some people in there, and 110 people 110 people clicked on it immediately to come and see it. So we had 110 people 2 days later, and it was lovely to share that space with a group of people, and they're all mega fans in this great little sort of basement pit, cinema, with Rogue, who's part of the Beatles royalty anyway, and just get their impression of what they felt about it when they left, which was lovely.
Nice. Well, folks, be sure to check out this movie called A Love Letter to the Beatles by the Fans by Simon Weitzman. And Simon, with that, if I can ever be of service to you, by all means, feel free to reach out. I feel like you and I hit it off pretty good.
Oh, yeah. I have to say that your questions from a filmic and televisual and musical point of view have been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. I like to ask questions that normally don't get asked, because when you look at other interviews, that's part of my research, is you look at previous interviews, and I find you have to answer the same questions over and over and over again. And it's almost like, oh, I got to answer this question again. Where when I start putting out my questions, I'm like, okay, I want to know this, because I've got a very inquisitive mind, and I don't like doing the same old. I like something that stands out, that's thought-provoking, and really allows the guest to tell their story. So
yeah,
it's good stuff.
absolutely, and you've done it, and I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure, because I like things where, and I hope the audience find, I hope the audience feel like they're sitting in the living room with us as well. It would be nice.
Yeah, very cozy, man.
Very
well,
cozy.
Simon, thank you so much. I look forward to your upcoming projects. Please let me know when the sequel to Love Letter to the Beatles by the fans, for the fans, come out. At P.S. I Love You, I think you're going to call it, right?
I think that's a great title. If we do, it may actually, I may come back to you for that one, because it's more relevant that we will probably end up making this as in an educational center somewhere, that this material will be available to everyone. So
we got so much material.
Yeah.
So there you go, buddy. Well, hey, thanks again. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the holidays, and stay warm and get healthy. Okay.
I will do my best. Thank you very much for that. Take care. Thanks to you and the audience and everyone involved behind the scenes. Thank you.
And for Beatles-A-Rama Radio and TV, I'm James D. Jones of the Magical Mystery Tour, and you've been listening to Simon Weitzman, the filmmaker of A Love Letter to the Beatles from the Fans. And with that, have yourself a great one, Simon. Thanks again for your time and your patience.
Thank you, James, and thank you all as an audience for all of your patience as well with us. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Simon.
Thank you.
All right.
The Beatles are about so much more than just being a band.
And it's actually where the Beatles truly formed and came together as a band.
How extraordinary is it that these two people met, John and Paul, and began to fire each other up to write these songs.
And you know that can't be bad.
1, 2, 3, pow!
Literally, this 26-year-old kid saying, I found a local rock and roll band who are going to be bigger than Elvis.
All My Loving came on, and she could tell that there was something that really lit my fire.
Yeah! How you guys feeling?
If you hear 10 of their songs, you're hooked for life.
This is how close we were. You could interact with the Beatles.
They're just having fun. That's a side of the Beatles that I think has a great appeal to people. It certainly does to me.
I was already hooked in the middle of the first song. How does that happen? It just grabs you.
The Beatles brought us from poverty to where we are now. We got invited to perform the fundraising concert in Madison Square Garden.
I've been doing Beatles tours for 30 years. I've probably taken something like 200,000 people, all ages, all nationalities.
I just couldn't turn down the opportunity to work with the Beatles. I'm on stage with Paul McCartney.
They're just a very special group of boys.
I wake up to the sound of music. Mother Mary.